Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Tyrone back with Tech Life, and we now have a map of where AT&T, once the deal is officially announced, will get additional fiber markets. And you can see it here. In the pink is AT&T's existing fiber footprint, and in the purple is where Lumen, which on the consumer fiber side is known as Quantum Fiber, is where they have a footprint. Right, and that's where AT&T, that's essentially what they would be buying. So this deal, as I've stated before, is a huge chess move by AT&T. It's a monster play, and this deal has so many implications, and it makes AT&T that much more flexible. Right, there were several questions. What does this deal do for AT&T? What is it? What does this purchase really do for wireless? It doesn't gain them any spectrum. So a lot of people still confused, right? So I wanted to break that down in this video, right? The one big topic that really AT&T has been pushing, right, publicly talking about it, being excited about it. Everyone else is kind of still, it's really not a big deal for us, right? In Verizon and T-Mobile, Convergence, it's a big deal for AT&T. They post numbers, they show us numbers, it's working for them. And the investor community, the analysts, right, they kind of have been following AT&T along this journey on convergence. So what happens now once the deal is announced and AT&T takes over these fiber markets from Lumen? Lumen has a huge backbone in the US. So what happens now, right? Stay with me. What happens when AT&T takes over the marketing, the go-to market, right? They told us very clearly that any new market that they build fiber in, or any new neighborhood, right, in the first year, the first 12 months, AT&T takes 1/3 of the neighborhood. And then they told us they attach a 40% conversion rate to that, to wireless. So now what happens, and where it makes AT&T flexible, one, they can invest in those markets now moving forward to further penetrate if they choose to, talking to the Lumen markets. And second, if they grow the convergence, which is going to boost their wireless share, guess what they're going to have to do in those markets? They're going to have to invest in the wireless network. Even if it's a market like Vegas or some other markets, right, that are weaker on the wireless side in terms of the density, whatever it may be, they're going to be forced to now have to invest based on the percentages of convergence that they've been telling the street in the market. They're telling us 40%, right? So out of just a basic number, so out of every 10 customers that get fiber, 4 of them will get wireless as well. And that number is expected to grow. So if that gets to 50%, 60%, whatever it may end up at, that's what AT&T is going to have to look at. So that's where the C-RAN is going to come into play. The towers are going to come into play, and AT&T will have to react. They will have to give whichever market explodes first, if it's Vegas, whatever market it may be, whichever the convergence starts to work in first, they're going to have to invest more. They're going to have to give the local team more funding for the local market to invest in the wireless network. The reason I can say and speak on that very comfortably is because it's happened here in my market in El Paso, Texas. AT&T had a surge of major market growth in the last few years, and it wasn't because of the wireless network. It was because of the convergence. The fiber was already here, right? So AT&T started on the postpaid market share side. They started like 12%, very, very weak market share. And they've little by little, they've created certain teams. They got the regionals involved. Then they started to put it to El Paso. Hey, we're going to do the one network, 2 countries. That was a go-to market for local marketing for me, right? Because we border Mexico. So that was a huge deal for AT&T. Then they started to realize the convergence is working. So they started to penetrate El Paso with even more fiber. Any new neighborhood, expansion neighborhoods, houses that are going up, AT&T is first there, and they're deploying fiber, right? So what happened after that fact? They started to grow wireless market share. So then what happened? They started to grow it very quickly and this is like, I'm backtracking like 2018, 2017 till now, right? So they went from 12% to like 20, I think they're now at 22, closer to 23%. So they grew a lot. So what happened? They started to invest in the wireless network. From, I want to say, 2021 through 2024, they had about a $42 million budget set aside for the El Paso market, roughly, right? Those are estimates. So then I started to see cell sites that we hadn't seen, like from 2011 through about 2018, 2019. We did not see a single cell site in this market. Nothing. They weren't doing densification. They weren't doing anything. The only thing they did, they were starting to, they were always investing in upgrading the cell sites that were already existing, like adding new spectrum, new radios, new panels, more efficient. They were doing that from the beginning. And then, FirstNet, they started to upgrade and the tower started to look different, right? They had a new setup. They were doing all that already, but they weren't densifying. So the RSRP was weak. Then they shut down HSPA. So we had some indoor locations that literally dropped to no service because HSPA was no longer available for a fallback network. So then as the market share continued to grow, AT&T had to start investing. And they did. Right now we're getting towers. We're getting C-RAN all over the place. And it's a better network now. And it actually got them from the third spot on root metrics, which is considered the gold standard by many. It got them into the second place and they moved T-Mobile to third place. So if you look at that scenario that I just talked about here in El Paso, Texas, if you look at the scale on this map, if AT&T replicates that puts T-Mobile in a very, very tough position. Right? Not to make this a T-Mobile video because it's an AT&T video, but it puts T-Mobile in a very, very tough position because T-Mobile can't converge at the same type of scale. FWA has huge limitations. We all know that. It's limited by capacity. So they can't sell convergence in an entire neighborhood that AT&T goes in with fiber. So that's one. And same goes with Verizon. If Verizon has Fios and once they get Frontier and they get that into the entire neighborhood, T-Mobile's done. How is T-Mobile going to respond to that? If they drop price on the FWA product, right, they're going to create demand that they can't meet. So there's going to be people calling in. There's going to be people trying to see if their addresses are approved, and they're just going to be put on the list to be emailed at a later time when it becomes available. That's all that's going to happen. Now, that might get T-Mobile to think, okay, maybe we should invest there. We should do something different. But what else is T-Mobile going to do? Right? The only other options that T-Mobile has today is cable, as I mentioned. That would be meaningful and impactful. Or they invest more in the current partnerships that they're in to have them expand into other markets maybe. Like Tillman, Metronet that they're still waiting to close, Lumos, and several other players like Pilot, right? They would have to invest into those. But even those partnerships, T-Mobile is not 100% owner. They're only 50% at best. And the other ones like Pilot and Tillman, we really don't even know the percentage of ownership that T-Mobile has in that part. So that was a big chess move, ladies and gentlemen, by AT&T. I'm telling you guys, that was a huge chess move. Not just against T-Mobile, but just to be competitive overall. Verizon is getting more competitive in the fiber space. They've always been competitive on the East Coast. That's why AT&T really never went to the East Coast with any fiber. So it really sounds like all these companies want to be first to market with the fiber product. They don't want to go into a territory that Verizon say already exists in and vice versa, right? But eventually, they're going to have to meet each other somewhere, right? So I thought about it. And there is another deal that T-Mobile possibly could work to close out the video, and that's Google Fiber. For those of you who remember G5, I think it was some call it G-Fiber, some call it Google Fiber. Whatever it is, T-Mobile could possibly work that deal, but I don't know if Google Fiber necessarily has that much scale in itself. So T-Mobile would have to invest a significant chunk of money to get it to the type of scale that Verizon and AT&T are at today, if convergence is believed to be a huge deal. And I think it is. I think it's starting to head that way, even though the carriers really haven't talked about it much. But if it's taken off for AT&T the way that it is, the others will have to respond in some way, shape, or form. They're going to have to respond, right? Verizon's response arguably was getting Frontier. T-Mobile's response, Metronet, Lumos, and the other deals that they have going on, right? But Regardless, T-Mobile caught up in the wireless space. You know, they're still a smaller network, but they caught up in being able to compete more efficiently, spectrum, everything else, right? Now, T-Mobile has to play catch up on fiber. So they're in a sort of maybe uncarrier competitive mode again when it comes to competing against home broadband. Now, we're probably going to go through the same round of M&A that we saw T-Mobile go through on the wireless side. They're going to now have to take that playbook to the home broadband market to really effectively expand into the market. They're still very small and they're still very new. So like I said before, in order for T-Mobile to compete financially and strengthen their balance sheet, they can strengthen their own balance sheet using the wireless network. We get that. They're monetizing whatever they can, but they will never, ever be able to match the revenues and intake that Verizon and AT&T do, because they have a whole nother business segment that they're tapping into, and that's fiber. And Verizon and AT&T aren't just tapping into consumer fiber, they're doing enterprise fiber, and it's a huge business for them. Like I said, there is no amount of money or price increases that T-Mobile can do on the wireless side that's going to be able to make up that type of revenue. It's just not going to happen. And then if they do raise the price that high, their wireless business is going to crumble. People are going to leave. So they would never even attempt to do that. The only thing that they can do, they can use the success, the free cash flow that they're gaining on the wireless side and continue to invest into fiber. And I think, and I'll close out the video on this, and I think they did buybacks and dividends too soon. I think they should have, at least both. I think they should have did one or the other and used that other money that whichever they decided not to do, and invest that into fiber. I really truly believe that was a mistake. Maybe at a later time they could have started with the dividend first and then did buybacks, right? But they decided to do both at the same time. So their money is, I don't want to say spent, but it's already very well allocated, right? Between buybacks, dividends, the network, and everything else, right? So it's going to be tough, right? T-Mobile is definitely going to have to go to the debt market, which they have a high credit rating now. They're going to have to go after a cable player, and I think that's going to hurt their stock a bit, because it's a massive amount of debt that they would take on. But I think besides that, a Google Fiber play could be in the works possibly, or like I said, a company that has some copper, some fiber. But it's really uncharted territory for T-Mobile. They don't really know how to convert copper to fiber. They don't know how to own and operate it. So it's interesting regardless, but a big play by AT&T, huge chess move, right? We still have to wait for this to come out publicly, but this is a great deal. This is going to bring even more competition, but it does likely mean we're going to see a pretty big consolidation in the fiber space. So let me know your thoughts. Like, share, subscribe. See y'all in the next one. Peace.